Welcome to Startup Secrets. Today, we are joined by Pat Hourigan, co-founder of one of Ireland's newest startups, Reev Money, specializing in the exciting area of peer-to-peer lending and setting out to disrupt one of the oldest business practices of lending money. Welcome, Pat, to Startup Secrets.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Hi, Pat.
So, Pat, tell me, very simple question. Who is Pat Hourigan?
Oh God, is that a simple question? Yeah, I guess it is a simple question. I'm a father, a husband. I'm a technologist. I've been 20 odd years in the technology game. I actually started out working in startups. I started with a man called Ramal Pereira back in 99, 2000. Ramal he's a fairly well-known entrepreneur in Ireland. He started Car and Network 365. I think I was the second or third employee there. That was great crack for a few years, and then I ended up traveling and working in different countries in the technology space. And then I moved back to Ireland, and I settled into a nice, comfortable life in multinationals for the best part of a decade. And I actually learned a lot. I learned a lot in multinationals. Stuff that you don't realize is actually valuable to you when you're learning it. You think it's just overhead and inefficiency, but it's really, really valuable to you when you try to sort of consume what really a business is all about. And I've always wanted to run my own business. I've just never had the opportune time to do it. And circumstances changed over the pandemic, and the timing was right. And between myself and my other co-founders, we kind of mustered the courage to do it. And this is where we are. You know, it's a courage thing. It actually kind of boils down to that. It's a courage thing. You know, it's very difficult to leave a really well-paying job, especially when you're at my stage in life with young kids and mortgages and whatnot. It's a bit of a leap of faith.
Sure.
And that takes a little bit of courage, I think.
Pat, can I just ask you, what sectors were you working in previously?
Yeah, it's sort of across three sectors really. So the vast majority of it was in mobile and telephony, aviation, and financial services payments. So it's been broad. Like when you're a computer programmer, for want of a better phrase, you tend to pick up jobs in the digitalization of those industries. And that was over 20 years or 20 plus years. You tend to knock in and out of different industries as they become digitized.
Sure.
And I think certainly at this point where we are with Reev Money, we see really the digitalization and the mass convenience of lending. And the skills that we've learned over probably 20 years, they're transferable. You know, especially in software, a lot of your skill sets, your logical thinking, your abstraction, they tend to apply to different industries pretty much universally. The domains are different, of course, and there's different regulation and all this other stuff, but your approach is generally the same. I find that.
Okay, and your current project, Reev Money, what exactly does Reev Money do? What does it offer?
Yeah, so look, the basic principle is to make short-term retail credit highly convenient and highly affordable. Our main target market is the UK. So the principle is that if you look in the UK, it's quite a large market in terms of short-term credit. It's an instrument that's used very readily by a large portion of the population. It ranges from retail credit, which is, your venerable retail banks, charging anything from sort of 10% all the way up to probably 40% representative rates. And as you head across the spectrum, you end up with payday loan companies who really treat their customers quite poorly and are being regulated out of the market, right? So there's a broad spectrum of lenders, and we look at that and we think it should be fairer for people. Both in terms of convenience and how readily accessible that credit is to you, and also the fairness of it, the price that you pay for it, and the terms that you get, because not all lenders treat customers the same. You have a lot of lenders that are being now regulated out of the market or soon to be regulated out of the market, that use all sorts of obfuscated methods to get people to avoid making payments, so they can ratchet on balloon payments and adjustable rates, and we don't like that. We think there's a fairer way of doing business, and the system of Reev is pretty simple. It's about connecting people. It's about connecting people who have needs and wants and who are often vulnerable in terms of their financial situation, and making sure that they can connect with other people in their community who are looking for a steady return. And that's the peer-to-peer element to it. So the borrowers are citizen borrowers and the lenders are citizen lenders. And we sit in the middle and we facilitate those transactions and making sure that the platform adheres to all the regulatory compliance and, the standard stuff that your banking providers provide to customers in terms of KYC, know your customer due diligence, making sure that the transactions are underwritten, making sure that people have the capacity to repay, making sure that the affordability checks and the credit ratings are done on a fair and equitable basis. And that's what our platform offers, right? But essentially it's about connecting people. And we think it's very similar to how Airbnb functions, right? You could rent a hotel before Airbnb. It hasn't invented that system, right? You could rent a B&B, but what Airbnb simply did was it said the reward system for B&B should be, the vast majority of reward should go to people who are providing the service rather than the middleman. And that's the kind of service that we're aiming to provide. So we sit in the middle. We charge a very low brokerage fee for connecting citizen borrowers and lenders. And the goal is to make sure that borrowers are serviced with their debt needs very conveniently and at the fairest price in the market.
I think I think what you drew on something which is very important for the digitization, which is a good tagline for Reev Money, is going to be simply connecting people, and I think that's a good way of doing it in the new digital age, really. So Pat, having known you now for a short while, tell me what does drive you? I know you've touched on why you left the company, and it's a big risk leaving it with family and everything. But what does drive you? What makes you passionate to go after this dream and this absolute new startup?
I just can't see it not working. I have a lot of confidence in it. I'm not a very I wouldn't say I'm risk averse, nor would I say I'm reckless. I'm sort of calculated about the way I do things. That's probably the best way I could describe myself. I'm quite a calculated person. So I look at the expanse of a problem, and then I'll try and pick areas that I don't have knowledge in, and I'll try and get enough knowledge to know that what I don't know is not worth knowing, and what is worth knowing, that I should probably learn it. So my journey with this is I started out with sort of a different idea. It's related, but it's different. The idea was to allow people to borrow using their current account so they could buy cryptocurrencies. And that was about 2.5 years ago. And it's just not interesting. I mean, look, cryptocurrencies are interesting. There's no doubt about it, but it feels a bit Wild West. And I think that's very risky to me. It just seems really risky. And it seems like you could do well, and you could probably become a billionaire from it, but you could probably also end up in prison. And right. Those risks, I couldn't balance those risks. And then I started thinking about, there's lots of really stable markets. And if you look at companies like Uber and Airbnb, and what have they really done? They've taken established, tried and tested businesses that consumers really need in their day-to-day lives, and they've just made them more convenient for the most part. And they've somewhat democratized the business model. And I thought, well, why don't we try something like that? And then I started looking at it and said, right, well, we don't know anything about business lending. I don't know anything about business lending, but I know a lot about personal finance. And the more and more I thought about it, I said, well, actually, this isn't as risky as we think it is. And then we start driving towards conversations with regulators in the UK, and they give you more confidence. And every time you speak to somebody else like yourself, Barry, you get a little bit more confidence. And what you're looking for is are you suffering from confirmation bias just because it's your idea?
Yes.
Are you surrounding yourself with people who think, oh, Pat, that's a great idea. You're really smart. You're not looking for those people. You're looking for people that will tell you you can't do this because there's a law, there's a regulation, or it's really difficult to do, or you're in the wrong jurisdiction to do it. And the more and more we go through this, the less and less the odds are of failing. And I think that's really why I'm doing it, because I really do think it will be successful. And we've got a really good team. I know everybody says they've got a really good team, but a lot of us have been together for a long time. And it's like when you know somebody, right? When you really know someone, you know what makes them tick, you know how to wind them up, you know how to not wind them up. And that's really important, especially when you're trying something that's difficult, right? You need to be able to rely on the people around you and the team around you. And we're fortunate in that sense that we've got a nucleus of a really strong team, and we know where we've gaps. I consider myself to be a really coachable person, right? So it's, if I know something, I know that I know it. But if I don't know something, I like to surround myself with people that can help me understand what that area is about. So I consider myself really coachable, and I think that's probably my strongest asset. It's not my mathematical ability or my ability to knock out lines of code. It's the ability to be coachable. I think that's the greatest skill anybody can have. I think it's really important.
Can I just ask you, Pat, as well? Every time you hear a financial related advert, whatever media, you hear regulated by the central bank. Are you inundated with regulation and barriers to what you're trying to create here?
I find this area really fascinating. It probably means I'm a really boring person, but regulation is fundamentally about consumer protection. That's once you understand that that's what it's about, it becomes a real asset to you. So at present, we're going through the preparatory filing for the FCA. And look, there's thousands of pages in it. It's a really big handbook, the Code of Conduct handbook for consumer credit. And then we've got a specialist company helping us with that in the UK and a law firm. But the actual application is fundamentally about how do you protect consumers. And protecting consumers is for us, it's on both sides of the transaction. So you have lenders, you have people who are coming in and putting in money, and in some cases it's significant sums of money for consumers, and you want to make sure that you're protecting them. So it's how do you do wind down planning in the event of a failure? How do you ensure that somebody is not adding money under coercive terms? So if it's an elderly a parent or whatever, that they're not being forced to put in their life savings into this platform for whatever reason. And then on the borrowing side, that you're treating people with fairness and empathy, and how you handle vulnerable customers. Look, personal borrowing is really about providing people with a financial offering that most of the time they don't want to use. Right? That's kind of how I look at it. So you might have somebody who has a debt in the family and has an immediate bill that needs to be paid. They're a vulnerable customer. You need to, and the FCA handbook and regulatory is all about how you treat that person and how your systems and your automations and your algorithms behave under certain circumstances. And if you view it that way, it actually becomes an asset to you, because it really helps you design up your system to make sure that it's robust and it'll handle the stresses that are thrown at it in 6 or 10 months' time or a year's time. Because from a technology platform, what you don't want to do is just sort of build a happy path, and then 10 months down the line, there's another pandemic outbreak, and then you're stuck wondering, how the hell do I manage, £1 billion worth of debt that's maturing and doesn't look like it's going to get paid, right? Okay. So you use it as an asset. Okay,
thanks for that. I have a 6-mark question for you now, Pat. It's if you could go back in time, to when you're starting out your first startups, or even this startup, and you were writing a letter to yourself, what would you write in that letter?
I honestly would have said, I kicked myself. I should have started this earlier. I really should have done it earlier. I think I procrastinated a bit too much at the start. This idea was really, I had it nailed on, the nucleus of it started out. I had all these little sketches. I'm a doodler. I always carry a book with me. I had it nailed on about 24 months ago. I should have started then. I should have just got on with it. And that's what I would say to myself. I just would have went back and done it sooner, because I know we'd be much more advanced. And that kind of speaks to the confidence of it.
That's a great answer, really great answer. So would you have a word of advice for somebody starting out now?
Well, we haven't been successful yet, so I think I would just say this: anybody who's probably thinking about it, I think you've got. Everybody's different. I think you've got to do the calculated risk view of it. I think, look, for me, it was about making sure that my family life could support it, right? And that's making sure that my wife is on board, that, you know, our family time isn't it's going to be impacted, right? And then you want to make sure that your family finances aren't impacted, because if that stuff isn't squared away, you just won't sustain. I don't think you'll sustain 2 years of a difficult road or 3 years of a difficult road ahead of you. So I think you have to figure that bit out first. Because if that doesn't work, I don't think any idea will work, because you just won't sustain it. And I think that would be my only advice to somebody. If you're thinking about it, I would say really figure that bit out first, because, you know, businesses succeed and fail, but you have to live.
Great.
That's great. So Barry, do you want to do a wrap up there?
Yeah, so Pat, thanks very much for your time. Really, really appreciate it. I think you're on an incredible journey. I think your service is absolutely going to disrupt. I really do. I think it's going to disrupt the money lending business. And we wish you, on behalf of Mike and I, we wish you the very, very best of luck to yourself and Brian and the rest of the team.
Thanks, guys, and thanks for inviting us. It's been good.
Well done.
Thank you.